Moving into the home of your beloved grandfather 1 year after he disappeared can be hard. But when your missing grandfather's puppet emerges from behind the bedroom wall and stares at you while you sleep, perhaps fear should be the appropriate response. Hello, I'm Ilyria, the book fiend. I love books, stories, and all things connected to the craft of writing. For the first book review of this year's Spooktober celebration, I am presenting my thoughts on Ben Farthing's I Found Puppets Living in My Apartment Walls. I Found Puppets Living in My Apartment Walls is the first of 2 books in Ben Farthing's I Found series. It was self-published and released on the 1st of August, 2023. The book is available in ebook, paperback, and audiobook formats. I purchased a paperback copy of the book to read for this review. Now, let us summarize and set up the book. Johnny awakes. A puppet looms over his bed. He recognizes the furry monster. Grandpa was its puppeteer on the children's television show Our City Street. But Grandpa went missing a year ago. He disappeared from this very apartment building, which was converted from the old Our City studio. Desperate to see Grandpa again, Johnny follows the puppet inside the building's walls, ever deeper into a puppet-infested labyrinth. I Found Puppets Living in My Apartment Walls was a short book. It was an easy read. It was competently written, and it was not bad in its writing. It came in at only 160 pages, and I must warn you now, dear watcher, this review will be a bit of a hot take. So many people seem to have loved this book, but I am not one of them. My biggest problem was not the writing in terms of its competency. It was the narration. And I want to talk about that first because my problem with the narration will set up all of the other issues that I had while reading the book. The narration moved very swiftly, paragraph after paragraph, line after line, page after page. Well, that is because most of the paragraphs were between 15 and 30 words in length. They were very short, they were very simple, and they moved very fast. That being said, the narrative itself plodded along at a pace antithetical to that suggested by the narration. And I would go through page after page of movement and dialogue, but nothing really happened. It took a long time for anything to happen in the narrative. And then I think that contributed as to why I felt afraid. Pacing, narration, description, ambiance, these are all essential elements of horror. And Farthing wrote his book as if the appearance of the apartments, the nature of the puppets, the scene, the characters, their motivations, their feelings, were all part of a shared set of experiences that we should immediately and without effort call up. And while the puppets being similar to the Sesame Street Muppets was very, very clear, the lack of narration, of ambient description, of a scene set with details to latch onto, that horror relies upon to build tension, to make us care about the fate of our protagonist, and to increase the fear when something happens to them, I found absent. So my biggest critique really is the form and the function worked against each other. And that said, the characters were kind of flat. I can't really call them stock characters because even in horror, stock characters often do have stereotypical growth arcs. Johnny and his cousin Brittany, read like things in the story, simply happened to them. But they did not make things happen in a way that felt authentic, meaningful. It was plot-driven, and while that is not a bad thing, it made the story read as something that was from an earlier time, when that was more expected of horror, instead of more character-driven horror that we have come to expect now. That being said, there were genuine points in the novel where I did get excited. When Johnny pulled away the cardboard on the walls and ventured into the land where the puppets lived, I got this ecstatic nostalgia. I was going to read through the exploration of Fraggle Rock. There would be Fraggles and Doozers and things like that, where I could dance my cares away and my worries would be for another day. Of course, that was replaced by the vague horror that is less scary than replaying the original Resident Evil video game. I found myself frustrated and unsatisfied by the promise of nostalgia and an explosion of fear that never came. And that leads to the biggest disappointment with a horror novel or a horror movie for me. Lack of fear. I never felt afraid. I haven't felt afraid while reading a horror novel in decades. The last novel I read that terrified me to the point of giving me nightmares was Stephen King's Cujo. The last movie that scared me to the point I ran out of the cinema in tears was Return to Oz. And I wanted to be scared. You don't understand. I wanted these puppets to be creepy and disturbing beyond the basic creepiness of them moving on their own in ways as if they were still being controlled by humans. I wanted to feel fear, to be creeped out to the point I couldn't sleep, but that never came. And that's never a fun place to be. Trust me. So, this is why that it was so upsetting to me. Beneath the blurb on the back of the book, author Jonathan Butcher says, "I found puppets living in my apartment walls is goosebumpsy," but then dives into something terribly, cosmically wrong beneath the surface. Now, dear reader and dear listener, dear watcher, for this will be on my blog and on my podcast, I have never read a Goosebumps novel. I may ask you, and I will do that now, suggest your favorite Goosebumps novel for me to read in the future. I admit I have never read Goosebumps, but I have read quite a lot of cosmic horror. But I found puppets living in my apartment walls did not give me the sense of dread, the sense of smallness, the sense of I don't matter in the universe. The way well-written and well-presented cosmic horror, like H.P. Lovecraft's best fiction, or when Stephen King draws upon the cosmic horrors in some of his novels, or in my favorite video game of all time, which you will hear me talk about a lot in the near future, Bloodborne. Farthing tried. He did introduce cosmic horror elements, but he missed the mark. As such, I give I Found Puppets Living in My Apartment Walls 1.5 imps. It wasn't for me, and that's okay. Not every book is for every reader, but we have to read the books in order to learn which books are not for us. Now, I do think that this story and the idea has some really great premise and merit. I think it was the wrong medium. were this presented as a short film, where the camera visuals and the movement of the camera could mitigate pacing issues, I think this could be very creepy. So, Mr. Farthing, should you happen to see this, I like your idea, but maybe you should consider turning it into a film and not a book, because I think this would be a really solid, short, maybe an animated film. Something where we have the puppets and we can see them moving about in ways that look slightly more natural, but I do think as a film this would be infinitely more successful. Yes. So, if you like the idea of puppets moving on their own, and I loved House Beneviento in Resident Evil Village, and you love something many find nostalgic and Goosebumps-esque, you may enjoy I Found Puppets Living in My Apartment Walls. Thank you for joining me. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. Comment below on any books you would like for me to read and review. Next week, in Spooktober, I will review Unwrap My Heart, or It's Time for Mummies, by Alex Falcone and Ezra Fox. Have a good week, and I will see you soon.